Support for Central Florida Public Media comes from UCF Continuing Education, offering professional development and corporate training services for the modern workforce. UCF Continuing Education provides a range of courses and workshops available in person or online, designed to enhance skills and knowledge in various fields. More at ce.ucf.edu.
Welcome to Engage, leading conversations that matter. Join in the conversation. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Send a recorded talkback message on the free Central Florida Public Media app. Leave a voicemail by calling 407-273-2300, extension 246. Engage is made possible with the support of listeners like you.
You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. So how much do you remember about when you were 4 years old? What do you remember from then? That's how old Atziri Barrera was when her parents illegally brought her to America from their home in Mexico. The only life that she's ever known is the one she lived here in Florida. Atziri and her family have spent decades wondering if every day could be the day they are detained and deported. Atziri obtained DACA status when she was 13. Later, she attended and graduated from Rollins College. Today, she is a data organizer with Poder Latinx, a nonprofit advocate for Latino immigrants of all classifications. She is still a registered DACA recipient and a potential target for deportation. The first Trump administration tried to end the Obama-era program. It protects recipients from deportation. Moving forward, there is uncertainty surrounding its future when Trump returns to the White House with a Republican majority in Congress. Arguments over the legality of the program are playing out in courts. For now, DACA recipients, also called Dreamers, can enroll in the Affordable Care Act. Florida, though, is one of the 19 states fighting that ACA coverage expansion. Last week, State Senator Randy Fine filed a bill to end in-state tuition for undocumented students at state colleges and universities. The Brevard County Republican lawmaker said this would not change the admission policies, but it would eliminate the lower in-state rate. We spoke to Senator Fine Wednesday of last week, shortly after he filed the bill, and asked him why he filed the bill when he did.
I don't believe illegal immigrants should be given discounted tuition to Florida State universities. And there's a fundamental fairness issue. If someone who lives in Valdosta, Georgia, wants to attend Florida State, which may be the closest good university to them, they pay 3 times what an illegal immigrant does. Americans should not pay more for services than people who shouldn't be in the country anyway. This is a fundamental matter of fairness.
Is it fair to punish the kids, these students, who they had no choice? They were brought here as babies and children.
I understand the concern, but I think that we need to hold accountable the people who human trafficked and abused those children by putting them in that position. The problem is people don't want to hold them accountable. I'm okay with that, with having that discussion. But the second issue is if you continue to offer magnets and incentives to come to America illegally, more people will come. And we need to eliminate those magnets that get people to come.
Let me ask you if I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly. Do you believe that families in other countries are seeing the in-state tuition as kind of a motivation to come here?
I think that there are some illegal immigrants. I'm not saying all. There are multiple people. There are multiple reasons people come to this country illegally. But there is a group of illegal immigrants who come to the United States because they want to take advantage of free things that they can get if they come. This is one of them. Am I saying that people come exclusively to get this? No, but we need to eliminate them all so the people who are coming for free stuff stop doing it. And the ones who are here for free stuff go home.
Yesterday, federal court ruled DACA recipients in 19 states, including Florida, cannot apply for ACA benefits. Do you support that ruling?
Absolutely. They're illegal immigrants. They should not be in this country. They should be at home.
Senator Fine, anything you would like to add that I did not ask you?
You liked these 2 bills. There's a lot more coming.
I just want to repeat that interview was conducted last week. Now, the elimination of the DACA program could eliminate the shield dreamers have from deportation. Earlier, I spoke with Atziri Barrera and the uncertainty and insecurity she lives with as a Central Florida DACA recipient came up. She joined Engage to talk about that uncertainty she's experiencing. I started our discussion by asking her to describe life as an undocumented resident before the 2012 passage of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals policy, also known as DACA.
Before DACA, everything was uncertain. And honestly, a little bit after DACA, things kept being a bit uncertain due to the programs like constantly being changed. But before that, I didn't really know what my opportunities were going to be, right? Just continuing going to school. And since this program was geared towards younger people, still in middle school, that's when I was able to apply for that. So that uncertainty of not knowing if I could even go to college, if that was a possibility for me, that was all up in the air before that. So once I was able to apply for that, if I was going to be able to continue my studies, that became a little bit clearer.
Can you talk about the stress of being a 13-year-old carrying that weight?
Yes, right. You're going through a lot of changes at that age and not knowing what your future holds. Like that's when you kind of start realizing like, okay, I'm going to start high school, and like high school, you start talking about, oh, what college I can go to. So all of that, it's a lot of like hope that you have at that age and just seeing where all your friends, what their plans are for the future, and you're just not knowing if you're even going to be able to stay in the country, right? If tomorrow, like nothing is guaranteed, and just having so many doubts about what future you can even continue having here.
When did you become aware that you were not an American citizen? Can you speak about the understanding of just the implications, what that meant to you?
Yeah, so growing up in Central Florida was a bit of a blessing because of the rich Latin community that there is here. There's not a big Mexican community here, but very fortunate to have grown up in that like rich Latin American like community here. So being able to like develop my Spanish, and I finished learning Spanish here, going to elementary school, finished learning Spanish, and then continue on to learning English. I feel very grateful for that. I know that many other DACA students did not have that opportunity, but knowing that I was an immigrant always came with that uncertainty, right? Like knowing, and I think it really started to show off when I was starting to look into college, because I didn't really know that was going to be an option. Like back then also, like even after getting DACA, and actually graduated valedictorian from my high school, and I didn't really know like how big of a deal that was, right? And like looking into colleges, there was not a lot of information about DACA recipients or in-state tuition, like what that would look like for me. So even in the whole application process, I said, hey, I would be a potential DACA student. Like I didn't know what any of that would look like because there was not a lot of information about that.
So in 2012, DACA goes into effect, providing a layer of protection for you. Can you describe how that changed things for you?
Initially, and I think I share this with a lot of other community members, it was very surreal, and it was a program that we all didn't jump at the first time because of that uncertainty and many like programs not having worked out for the community in the past. So when it got announced, for me especially, in my family, was like, oh my gosh, like I can continue my education here. I can continue to take advantage of the great opportunities. And it was definitely like seeing that, okay, I can continue like going to college here, perhaps. And but it was still very uncertain if this is something that if this was going to be a viable program that would go beyond those first 2 years that they offer the permit. But it did change a lot. I mean, it opened up, especially part of it offered advanced parole. So through education purposes, business purposes, humanitarian purposes, it opened up the opportunity for DACA recipients to apply and be able to go back to our country for study abroad programs or anything. So that was one of the most exciting things, because at that point, obviously, I had not been back to Mexico in like all my life because I was here since 4 years old.
Well, there have been several legal appeals to the DACA program over the years. It could be in
Mm-hmm.
serious jeopardy under the Trump administration. He said he wants DACA recipients to stay in the country, but in the same interview, he said he wouldn't hesitate to separate families of mixed immigration status. Can you talk to me about how this mixed messaging is impacting any sense of security you might have?
Yeah, so we kind of go right based on the actions. And during the first administration, that was actually when I was starting college. And that's when DACA was revoked by the administration. And that also ended advanced parole. So that hope of me, being able to apply for a study abroad program, which was actually required by my business program, that was done. Like I had to have that conversation, right? Like, oh, this DACA, the was ended. I can't do any study abroad. So all of that happened in the first administration, right? And it's still, we are still seeing the effects of what happened in the first administration continue on forward with all the rulings. Right now it's in the courts. So regardless of the presidency who holds the seat, there's still court rulings that we have to pay attention to, right? Because right now they eventually, through the courts, advanced parole came back and I was able to actually visit Mexico after 20 years. However, we don't know how longer that is going to still be in effect. And right now, just looking at the incoming administration, seeing probably a continuation of that. But regardless, like I said, there's still the effects that we're seeing from the first administration and that having to end. And ever since then, we've been pushing, for more permanent solution through Congress, because that's really where we are looking for a solution for DACA.
Is there any way to prepare for this? Are you taking any type of preparations, knowing what might lie ahead?
The reality is that, what many of us know as home, or our people, our family, like everybody is here, our friends are here. So that's one of the things that you can't prepare for, right? If anything happens, like all of that is a jeopardy. The life, the people that we met here, like all of that are things that we can't prepare for. But other than that, keeping up with like all our paperwork, like if we, because DACA right now, there's no new applications being accepted. So if for some reason I cannot renew within a year, I am locked out of the program and my status is just gone. Right. So just being very diligent about that. What many of us are business owners, so we have to be on top of like all of that. And that's, another common misconception that we get, that we're here to take people's jobs, when in reality, a lot of people in the DACA community have started their own business and are employing U.S. citizens. So when all of these attacks come and how it's going to only affect like immigrant community, no, this is going to affect everybody, all Americans, whether you're in a mixed status family or even your employer could be a DACA recipient.
Do you have any concerns about possible deportation?
I mean, that's always been a reality for us ever since we applied to the program and making ourselves known. That is why, advocacy has been very important for especially DACA students and from students to now being in the workforce, kind of advocating in Congress, right? Ever since then has been very important because of that uncertainty, right? Because of the program ending. So advocacy in Congress, because in reality, we all kind of want DACA to end but be replaced with something more long-term, right? Like this is not the end goal to have this, and we're very grateful to at least have that protection, because many in our communities don't, and we know that many of us are in mixed status families.
That makes me wonder, what keeps you in Florida?
Like I said, this is home. This is where I've been since I was 4. That's one of the hardest things. Like you can prep for everything else, for the paperwork, and when my life can even look like, like I have a degree now, I can probably work somewhere else, I can open up myself, but it's the people that keep you here. Like my best friends are here, many families already here. So that's what keeps us here, and also that community that we still can go ahead and have an impact here. I mean, I was one of the few people in my college that came out, and when that was going around, that hey, I am DACA, like self-identifying. I know that there's many more, but because of that fear of retaliation have not come out. And just having like that connection to the community that has speaking out despite the backlash, and feeling that support here in Central Florida, right? And just family and friends.
Atziri Barrera is a DACA recipient living in Central Florida and first-generation Rollins College graduate. There's more ahead here on Engage. A pillar of the Central Florida arts community closes this weekend after 15 years. The creator of Snap Orlando joins us to talk about why he started the arts organization and his hopes for the art scene here moving forward. This is Engage on Central Florida Public Media. You're listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Ahead on this program, Snap founder Patrick Kahn announced he is closing the prominent photo gallery. He joined Engage to talk about attracting global artists to Central Florida.
When I called him and I say, Douglas, I would love to do this festival and have you as a main highlight artist. Would you want to come? He said, oh, I love Miami. I said, no, this is Orlando.
We'll talk about the Snap Gallery's role in promoting the arts in Central Florida. But first, 10 years ago, prosthetic arms for children weren't practical to make or use. Creating hand and arm prosthetics is challenging for engineers due to the tiny, specific movements hands create. Kids grow quickly and they can outgrow engineered arms, and replacing them, it's costly. Central Florida Public Media health reporter Joe Mario Pederson joins us now. Joe Mario, many of those developments have really come in the last decade with some local organizations helping lead the way here.
That's right. Limitless Solutions, the local nonprofit that arms kids with prosthetics, is 10 years old. Bionic arms for kids have come a long way from where they started 10 years ago in Central Florida. And, Limitless, the founders of that organization, they created the first 3D printed bionic arm for a child here in the United States. And, back in the day, bionic arms, before the renaissance really of 3D printing, they really couldn't hold much. And, as you pointed out, they were costly to make, and replacing it for growing kids was even costlier. And they didn't have a lot of personality, honestly. Families, engineers, and students took a look back on the advancements that have been made in the last 10 years with me. And we got to see that there's been this rapid development in pediatric prosthetics today, which are stronger and resemble characters in popular sci-fi and fantasy stories.
Okay, sounds good, Joe Mario. Let's go ahead and listen to your piece.
Eloise Bayless is 12 years old. She plays soccer, she fishes, and plays 5 instruments. She does all of that and more with one hand.
I'm one of those outdoor kids. I'm not one of those who stays inside all day long. I love playing Nerf guns with my friend next door, Caden. And I'll draw. I love playing video games too.
Eloise does a lot of things. In the last 10 years, she's had a lot of prosthetic arms too. Her mother, Elizabeth, says 10 years ago, there weren't great options.
We would go and we'd say, she needs a hand to do this, or she wants an attachment for her bike. And there were adult-sized things, or just people that really didn't know the skill of making pediatric prosthetics, right? And then they weren't functional. They didn't do anything.
For the last 3 months, Eloise has been using what she says is the best prosthetic yet, a hero arm from the company Open Bionics, which allows her to lift 30 pounds and grip things tightly by twitching small muscles near her elbow. Those twitches activate sensors that manipulate the robotic fingers. Here, Eloise is explaining how she has a bit of fun with her friends by grabbing a hold of their hands.
I like it a lot because I can break my friends so hard at school with it.
What do you do?
Oh, I just do this to them. And they cannot get out no matter what they do.
The Bayless family drove 3 hours from their home in Cape Coral to the Open Bionics clinical lab in Orlando, where engineers developed an arm just for Eloise. Today, they had a special gift marking 3 months without an issue since she got her arm.
Are you serious? This is so cool.
In partnership with Disney, Open Bionics gave her turquoise attachments 3D printed in the style of the movie Moana 2, complete with the Tafiti's heartstone on the back of her hand. Detailing prosthetics with well-known characters for pediatric limb loss patients is becoming more common.
That's always our hope, is find great partners who want to be able to use their storytelling abilities so that kids can identify and relate to those.
That's Albert Monero, president of Limitless Solutions, a nonprofit research facility over at the University of Central Florida, specializing in bionic arms for kids. Limitless began 10 years ago after Monero and his team found that children had difficulty accessing prosthetics.
They could be too heavy, too expensive. They need to really grow with the child.
3D printing answers that issue.
Dan Ferris is a professor of engineering at the University of Florida. He says that a little over 10 years ago, the advent of 3D printing changed what was possible for pediatric prosthetics. 3D printing material was light, cheap, and easy to make.
Because you can just quickly and easily replace parts to change the size without having to totally redesign the whole package.
At Limitless, Monero started with a team of 15, but it's grown to over 60 staffers, 57 of which are interns, including students who design video game software as a fun way of teaching kids how to trigger the small muscles in their arm to better use their prosthetic. In combination with 3D printing, Limitless also added an injection molding machine to create more durable parts.
We're now able to injection mold those fingers because the fingers used to be too brittle and too fragile.
Limitless and Orlando Health recently signed an agreement that beginning next year will give more access to prosthetic arms to kids that, like Eloise, allows them to live more full lives. Although for Eloise, she's still getting used to using 2 hands. She's figured out how to play piano, but she still hasn't figured out video games.
How do you even play a game with 2 hands? Do I grab?
Joe Mario Pederson, Central Florida Public Media.
Joe, that was such a nice story. While we have you here, we've been doing this year in review look back with our Central Florida Public Media reporters in the newsroom. And like I said, that story just brought us about the robotic prosthetic community and providing limbs for children. It's so inspiring. I'm wondering, as you look back on the year, can you think of another story that was maybe impactful for you in some way?
Yes, and honestly, it's pretty on topic. I think the story that this kind of conjures up is my work with Revive Soldiers Ukraine, which is this nonprofit that works with Ukraine veterans who suffer from lower limb amputations. And they work out of Prosthetic and Orthotics Associates, which is in South Downtown. And what they do is they're able to bring amputees over from Ukraine here to the United States, and they're able to give them these lower limb prosthetics, these legs, and help them work through learning how to walk again in the South Downtown area. And I got to meet some really cool people. Dmytro Dimitrosnovsky, he's a 24-year-old double leg amputee. And 6 months before I got to talk to him, he found himself in a trench with a grenade. And it's how he lost both of his legs.
The most difficult ever for him was to make that first step.
Working with the Revive Soldiers Ukraine group, Krasnovsky is walking again.
So during that second month, he really tried to engage all his muscles, all the training, exercising, to be able to make that. And he made the first step, the second was easier. The third one is easier, and then so on.
Just 3 months after that is when he was here in the United States. He was getting fitted for these prosthetics. He was learning to walk again. And when I saw him, he was becoming more comfortable taking those steps, right? But he had really come such a long way. Learning how to walk on these prosthetics, it's no easy feat. And he was focusing on learning how to run in the next 3 months after that, right? And some of the other gentlemen that I had talked to on their journey of learning to rewalk, they're already competing in amputee competitions where they're playing basketball or soccer with their peers. Swimming. This gentleman, he had already won like 7 gold medals in these competitions. So getting to know the struggle that these guys have had and getting to know that the life that they're trying to secure for themselves now, that was really moving. And the work that's being done with the folks over at Revive Soldiers Ukraine, this nonprofit, it's been really inspiring to see.
I hesitate to even call it a feel-good story, but I mean, the outcomes obviously are so wonderful that you were just talking about. But on your beat, you are dealing with some really tough issues as a health reporter. What is it like covering that beat in our area?
So as you pointed out, my title is health reporter, but I often make the joke that that's an inappropriate title. It should be renamed the death beat. It should be the death reporter, because you got to deal with that a lot. Mm-hmm. It's most of the beat, right? Is the things that are threatening or are harmful. And Yeah, as you point out, there's certainly a lot out there. I think one of the stories that I found myself really resonating with. So full disclosure, I'm a reporter in my early 30s, and I was doing a story earlier this year about early onset cancers and how we've been seeing those numbers creep up more and more. And talking to doctors who cover that, they've said that they've noticed that trend for years, that they have been getting younger and younger patients. And in covering that story, I found myself, I usually feel very disconnected, try to practice as much objectivity as you can. In that situation, it was a little harder to not to imagine yourself like in those shoes. And that was tough. But mostly I am able to keep that level of disconnection thanks to, such as being around really awesome coworkers such as yourself, and spend time with family, trying to unplug as much as you can, and then try and reassess it the next day, one step at a time, right?
Can you look back and think of an issue, a topic, something that came as a surprise to you looking back on the year?
Yes, and I am actually very proud of this one.
Okay.
So it is the dengue numbers. Dengue is a mosquito-borne disease, right? And going into the year, we knew that dengue was probably going to be seeing a rise because of the way that the climate was flourishing, the way that we were seeing more travel, and with warmer temperatures and more cycles of moisture, those are really ideal conditions for mosquitoes to thrive, right? And I want to say about 4 or 5 months into the year, decided to just take a quick look at the Department of Health's numbers on dengue. And I saw that they were significantly higher than what we had anticipated for that time of the year. We got the story out. We actually got the story out ahead of the New York Times, which is feather in the cap for my year. Love that. But yeah, that number has continued to rise in pretty, I would say, alarming ways, mostly because it was far greater than what we anticipated. The numbers right now, we're currently not done with the year, right, are 4 times greater than what experts were thinking it was going to be. And, what that tells us is that there was much more travel than we anticipated, right? And that there was much more mosquito reproduction than we thought. And this story matters because we are trying to make sure that these numbers that we're seeing, and for the record, we're talking about travel-associated dengue, meaning people who have left Florida, have come back to Florida, and they have dengue. This matters because we are trying to make sure that nobody is bitten by local mosquitoes and those mosquitoes are able to spread dengue here. We don't want dengue to become endemic here in Florida, right? But overall, I'd say, yeah, that was the biggest surprise, was just how big those numbers ended up being.
Well, I think that's just an example of how important your work is in informing the community. I know you have an incredibly busy year ahead of you, and we appreciate you. Central Florida Public Media Health reporter Joe Mario Pederson, thank you for joining us in studio.
Thank you for having me.
A photography and digital arts gallery that sits on East Church Street in downtown Orlando is a space where several award-winning artists have displayed renowned works. Over the last 15 years, SNAP Orlando has developed into an established pillar of the arts community. A goal of the arts organization was to celebrate photography and increase the appreciation for and visibility of it as a medium. SNAP was founded by Patrick Kahn. He recently wrote that when he and his wife Holly opened SNAP, a hope was to create a spark that inspired a wider appreciation of the arts in Central Florida. That was part of a farewell post he penned. SNAP closes this weekend because Kahn needs to focus his attention on his personal battle with cancer. He joined Engage earlier today to talk about how he's seen the arts community evolve here over the years. Kahn begins our conversation by sharing more about why he opened the SNAP Gallery 15 years ago.
I had just freshly moved from LA to Orlando back in 2008 with my wife and kids. We relocated here in Orlando, and having lived in, big cities like LA, and I've done my schooling in Boston, and I lived in Paris, and all these big cities. When I came to Orlando, I really felt like there was definitely a void in the arts. I mean, it's kind of evolving. It's starting, but it's not like a internationally viable art scene. Like when you go to New York or Berlin, I mean, the first thing you know is like you have great museums, great offerings that people travel to just for that. And Orlando was not in a position to do this. So in 2010, the Downtown Development Board of the city was looking into kind of like rebranding themselves because, as you know, Sharon, the downtown Orlando, the city of Orlando is kind of suffering from the amusement park image that Orlando has throughout the world. So when I moved to Orlando, people say, "Oh, you're going to Disney World." And that's the only thing that people would think about, not like a very vibrant city with great art. So I know that downtown was trying to capture a little bit of attention and create something that would take people away from the amusement park section and bring them to Orlando. And that's when I proposed to them to do this first photography festival, because when I used to be in LA, I published a magazine. I had a lot of connections with artists and photographers, and I was in a position to bring national artists of pretty good caliber to Orlando for this first festival. And it was something unique that Orlando didn't have at this point.
And you've had several reputable award-winning artists show in your gallery. Would you mind sharing maybe some or one of the most notable artists that you've built a relationship with over time?
Oh, there's many. Obviously, the first one who came in and we did a repeat 10 years later was Douglas Kirkland, who is this famous photographer in Hollywood, whose most famous photograph was Marilyn Monroe in her sheets in her bed. And I had met Douglas Kirkland in Los Angeles when I was publishing the magazine, and I did a full feature on him. So we had already developed this relationship that when I called him and I say, "Douglas, I would love to do this festival and have you as a main highlight artist. Would you want to come?" He said, "Oh, I love Miami." I said, "No, this is Orlando." And it was interesting because people did not associate the town of Orlando with anything that had to do with art. So I didn't have to do much convincing, but I do think that my relationship with him helped, that he trusted, okay, this is a place where I should feel comfortable going.
And Patrick, just as much as you are comfortable sharing, would you tell me about what led you to the decision to close Snap?
I'm very comfortable with that. So it's a few factors, right? The first is that we've done a lot of different offerings. So we had the warehouses first when we did the festival, which was taking empty warehouses and doing 3-day festival. And after 5 years of doing this, we realized we had like a great turnout, but every year we had to kind of restart our marketing efforts so that people remember, oh yeah, it's time for Snap. So, like the Fringe Festival and all these other festivals, it's difficult because it's just one moment in time. So when after 5 years, we decided to get brick and mortar and have a year-long presence. Obviously, the spaces were much smaller, but we're able to have many more and address different type of demographics of the community. It's kind of time to close the chapter and let Snap Orlando be an inspiration in time that people can refer to at some point, but we don't want to fall into a routine where we're going to be offering, like less than what we offered before by being a little bit lazy, or, in time you lose your passion a little bit. And we had our passion for 15 years. And when we felt like, okay, now that my health is going, like I'm having health issues, and maybe it's the right time. The fact that we are doing that we are closing right now is also due to the fact that my health issues are terminal, and we both need to kind of focus on family time and quality time together, and like trying to get a lot of things off my shoulders because I'm a workaholic. And so, it's not time for me to think about this type of work and having to stress about, doing things perfectly when I have very bad health issues that are going to kind of, I probably have, I don't know how much I have time, but, not too long.
Patrick Kahn is the executive director and founder of SNAP. And Kahn told me that if his health improves, he would like to continue collaborating with other visual arts organizations after the gallery closes this weekend. And you can still download the City Unseen app launched by SNAP. It's an interactive augmented reality public art installation, and it guides you through an art experience and display throughout Central Florida. Coming up, the artist behind the final exhibition on display right now at SNAP joins us to reflect on that honor and what the arts community is losing when the gallery closes this weekend. This is Engage on Central Florida Public Media. Before the break, we talked to Patrick Kahn, the creator of Snap Orlando. The art gallery is closing this weekend after 15 years, so Kahn can focus on his health. An exhibition on display now is of work done by Dan L. Hess. He is the chief curator at the Art and History Museums of Maitland. He joined Engage to talk about the impact of the upcoming closure. Hess begins our conversation by describing his art called Earth's Last Picture. It's the final exhibition at SNAP.
I can't talk about the exhibit without talking about how the key role that Patrick Kahn played in that happening. Anytime you work for a nonprofit like I do, you're doing many jobs at once. So he had approached me about the exhibition almost 2 years ago, and he wanted to do it at the Terrace Gallery. He had just curated some beautiful exhibitions there, one with Chris Robb. And because I was curating a major exhibition for us here of the work of Gisela Romero, I told him that I couldn't really do justice to it, so I would have to put it on hold. But then, sure enough, just like Patrick would be, as soon as Gisela's exhibition opened, he approached me again and said, you don't have a choice this time. You just have to do this. And it's time for you. When I first moved down from New York, 11 years ago, I had a exhibition, a part of a group exhibition at SNAP of these large drawings I did. And Patrick loved them. The community responded well to them. So Patrick knew that him and I both had gone through difficult health situations in our life, long-term kind of chronic health issues. And so he wanted me to get a chance to just speak about, through my work, what that kind of would be. And I had these large canvases that I had, these almost 8-foot canvases that I had for years. And I figured it would be the time to do that. So according to Patrick's prompting, I have this exhibition, and you'll see these large, almost 8 by 5 foot canvases. They're kind of I wanted to create kind of a meditative space. And a lot of times, Florida has wonderful art, but a lot of times you don't see dark kind of meditative art. And Patrick was incredibly supportive of me doing that. I named it Earth's Last Picture because that was a Rudyard Kipling poem that my father had given to me as a sign of support when I went into the arts. He was a gym teacher. There wasn't much art spoken about in my house. So when I decided to do that, he had given me this poem, and I figured, the poem talks about, when Earth's last picture is painted, you would transition to a spiritual realm and the work would continue. So I figured that would be the perfect show title. At that point, I did not know what would transpire next. And that would be that Patrick would get this diagnosis that he would be dealing with an incurable form of cancer. So I offered to change the title. I offered to stop the exhibition, and he would have nothing of it. He wanted to do it. So it became incredibly meaningful for both Patrick and his wife, Holly, and I. He kind of figured that it could be the last exhibition that he curated that SNAP was involved in. And so the fact that we're dear friends and the fact that it was the subject matter it was incredibly meaningful for him that it would be the last exhibition.
How are you feeling about being potentially, well, it is the last exhibition at SNAP at that gallery on Church Street?
I only had about 8 months to produce the work, and I didn't think I could pull it off at all. And without sounding too metaphysical, whenever I showed up in my studio, which was my dining room of my house, my son referred to it as the crime scene because, I don't have too big a dining room. So the paintings were almost the same size as the room and things got a little crazy. But yeah, it took on a whole new meaning. And the beautiful thing about it was it allowed Patrick and I and Holly to have these really important conversations about, our care for each other, our love for each other, and how much Patrick's life and influence has impacted me. And, once we found out a month or two into the production of the work that we would be dealing with something incredibly emotionally significant, on one hand, it seemed like fitting. On the other hand, we wanted to kind of run from it. I wanted to run from it. But Patrick said, no, I want to walk this out with you. I want to walk this out. And the work became incredibly powerful because of him and Holly's support, to me, people have really gravitated to it since it's open. I've had people come up to me, even here at Maitland, where I'm the curator, and said how much the work meant to them. And, it's amazing. You don't think about how much loss is a part of people's lives, but it is. I had people come up to me and saying they just lost their wife, or they just lost their sister or their brother, and they saw the show, and it was incredibly cathartic moment for them. They could meditate on the loss. And I don't think loss is, it's a part of our everyday life. So when you have a moment to reflect on it and you have a setting where you can do that without any kind of other interruption, it became very important for people.
Dan, can you help me understand, as an artist, what is the significance of having your work displayed specifically at this venue, SNAP?
It's going to be very difficult for the city of Orlando to kind of rebound from the loss of SNAP. I know things will go on, but they're not going to go on the same way. And what I mean by that is Patrick and Holly created a very, very unique space where both international and local artists could find themselves exhibited in the same space with the same amount of care. Patrick has an incredible skill set that he brought with him from his years in Europe and in LA. He was very specific and very particular about it. And the thing that I think people don't understand is the thing that him and I formed an incredible friendship over was we both think that, in the art world nowadays, people look at art as a product, as kind of an end means to, some kind of product. But Patrick and I both can't separate the product from the artist and their lives and what they go through. And so people were incredibly encouraged by having their work shown at SNAP. And I'm one of them. I had significant shows up in New York, but coming down here and starting over and, finding my work at SNAP and the response from the community And back in the day, the SNAP openings on Colonial, they were getting like 600 or 700, 800 people at an opening, which was unheard of for Orlando, way bigger than the museums were getting. And this is a gallery, and people would dress up and show up, and it became a cultural moment. And because of that, it added significance to the scene. It like validated the Orlando art scene. And to think of that as not being around anymore is incredibly difficult and emotional for a lot of people that I've talked to. The exposure of these international artists that people in Orlando got exposed to through SNAP, they wouldn't get anywhere else. Especially SNAP was mainly focused on the photography, and there's not another venue around here that would bring these international, world-class photographers to Orlando. So, it's going to be a void for sure for a lot of us. And I think the younger artists coming up are going to feel the impact of that the most.
What makes you say that?
Well, there's a lot of wonderful cultural institutions in Orlando, but not many of them are geared to supporting underrepresented artists, local emerging artists, that haven't really set their career in concrete yet. Orlando's like a wonderful city with a wonderful art community, but it's very difficult to make a living here as an artist. And for people that were coming up that had, kind of a vision for their work, but didn't know if it had kind of the weight or the conversation to make it in a market outside of Orlando. Well, SNAP provided that for them. SNAP provided that space and that validation for them to see their work in a way where they gained that confidence to, again, start looking outside where they could really have a significant career. Yeah, so I think that like that younger group that didn't have that opportunity, hopefully other venues will show up. We focus on that here at Maitland because I think that Patrick and I have had that conversation. We kind of champion emerging local artists because we feel like that's a void. There's a lot of institutions that are doing wonderful work, bringing in these traveling exhibitions from outside, but not many are representing the local artists here. And SNAP was one that did it at the top of the game and really influenced a lot of local people to see themselves, in a way where they can move beyond Orlando.
Dan L. Hess is a chief curator at the Art and History Museum's Maitland. That's all for today's edition of Engage. Engage will be back after Christmas. I'm Sharon Stone. Thank you for the company. All Things Considered is coming up following NPR News.